Okay, well, we're going to get right into it. And please feel free to ask any questions that you would like in the chat box, because we would like to hear from you and your experiences as well. Mr. Bernick, will you please share your story of working with EDD, your passion for this type of work, and a little bit about your journey?
Well, thank you, Victoria. I'm glad to be here today. I actually date back to the Carter administration. Wow. I started in the field. I graduated from law school here at UC Berkeley back in 1979. And at that time, it seemed to me the key issue, as it has for the past 40 years, was employment. And so I started in 1979 working with a job training group here in San Francisco called San Francisco Renaissance Center. It operated a series of vocational programs, businesses, an early entrepreneurship center, an early welfare work program. So I've actually continued in the field now for 40 years in various capacities. I was head of our state employment development department in the early 2000s, and since then have been with a large law firm, Duane Morris, based here in San Francisco's financial district. I'm at One Market Plaza, and also continue in the field as the research director for the California Workforce Association and as a fellow with the Milken Institute. So I continue to be very involved, and Victoria continue to regard employment as the central social issue.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much. How do we talk to a live person at EDD?
Well, that is a challenge, Victoria. And I hear from people all the time who wonder if there's sort of a secret door. There's no secret door, unfortunately. I wish there were. Yeah. But in terms of, I recommend first using UI Online. There is a question answer function on UI Online. And I've done this with people, ask questions and do get a response. Responses are not always that helpful, but you do get a response often. In terms of calling, EDD has really bulked up its call center representatives in terms of adding more than 1,000. The system is better, Victoria, than it was back in April and May.
Yeah.
But it's still, a lot of persistence in terms of calling either there are two numbers.
Right.
The general number that's basically all the time that you can ask general questions about employment, but not particularly on your own claim. And then there's a number that's claim specific or specific to in which you can ask questions about your claim. And a lot of it is just, I wish I had a good answer. There's no good answer, but it's a matter of using one of those numbers and people do get through. And as I say, it is better than it was in the early part of the pandemic.
So this isn't on the list, but I thought while I'm listening to you, I thought of how did so many people who were in prison get unemployment?
It's a good question. I think, Victoria, there are two dynamics at play. One, we've always had fraud in the UI program.
Okay.
Until recently, it was very small.
Okay.
Probably less than 5% of claims.
Right.
And it was largely, a good part of that was simply inadvertent. In other words, people would go back to work, not report it to EDD, and continue to collect benefits. And of course, that's not legal. But sometimes people didn't know that they were supposed to contact EDD whenever they went back to work.
Right.
You have now, because of the enormous sums of money now pouring through the UI system.
Right.
Beginning in May or so, you had these much more sophisticated fraud rings. Some of the claims appear to be by prisoners But a lot of those, quote, prisoner claims are identity theft claims. In other words, claim.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, no, Scott, believe me, Scott Peterson didn't file
Oh, yeah.
for unemployment.
I forgot about that. That's not funny. Sorry, guys.
So it was really a matter of what you have, very sophisticated UI fraud rings.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to my next question. Is there anybody that wants to ask one before I move on? Okay, let's see okay, what is the American Rescue Plan of 2021?
Well, that was the name of the stimulus this year, the American Recovery Plan. It's not the one that was announced yesterday is yet another one.
Oh gosh, we have another one? Oh, okay.
We have another $2 trillion announced yesterday
gosh.
in terms of the infrastructure. But the recovery plan was passed earlier this year. And in terms of unemployment, it had a number of components.
Right.
But one part of it concerning unemployment assistance was to do two things. Two main things. One is continue a federal supplement. So whatever people were continue getting on the state level, they get an additional $300 per week.
Okay.
On this federal supplement above their state amount, and the state amount can be anywhere from $50 to $450 per week. And it extended the time that people can receive benefits for another 53 weeks. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so it extended the period up through September 6th of this year. September 6th.
Wow, that's good.
So
no, go ahead, keep going.
I was just going to say, you both get the supplement $300 per week, plus you can obtain it for additional 53 weeks through September 6th of this year.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Okay, and let's see. So the next question was, how does ARP of 2021 impact your claim? And I think you answered it. It's extended for 53 weeks.
Yeah, anyone who's collecting on regular unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance will see automatically their benefits will continue up to this 53-week period, additional 53-week period through September 6th.
Okay, now that leads to my next question, which is, what is the difference between pandemic unemployment assistance, PUA, and regular unemployment insurance, or UI? Oh, and then I have pandemic emergency.
There are, right?
My head is already hurting.
Number of titles. You have regular unemployment assistance. That's the basic unemployment that we've had in the state for many decades.
Right.
And that has always been, except for very rare exceptions, has always been limited to W-2 workers, people who are employees, not independent contractors, but employees. What the CARES Act did last March was to open up unemployment assistance to independent contractors. And it did it through a program that's called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. So that independent contractors, and they didn't even need to be completely out of work, but if their income was significantly reduced, could apply for UI, and did in very large numbers in California. So that's the pandemic unemployment assistance is what has been added for independent contractors. You have regular UI, and then you have the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, PEUC, and that does the two things that we mentioned earlier in terms of extending benefits for that 53-week period through September 6th of this year, and continuing or adding this $300 per week supplement. For a time last year, people recall we had a $600 a week supplement. Then it went down, and now it's still a supplement at $300.
300. Oh yeah, that's right. In the beginning, it was 600. That's true.
Yes.
So, okay, if a person has reduced hours, right, because of their restaurant or whatever now doesn't need them full time, or they have a child at home and they have to be at home some of the time because they're not in school, are they eligible for this whatever emergency or any of the pandemics?
Well, so let's take those separately. Someone whose hours are reduced, let's say, but is still employed. If they're still employed as a W-2 worker, they may be eligible. EDD has a relatively complex formula, but particularly if you're among a lower income, lower wage worker,
Yeah.
you can, if you meet this formula, collect even though you're partially employed. In other words, you can collect what's known as partial unemployment.
Yeah.
And collect the $300 per week. So it all depends, Victoria, on the individual case. And as I say, in that particular partial unemployment, it's a relatively complex formula of what your wage level is, how many hours you've been reduced, and it really is on a case by case. But I would recommend anyone whose hours like that have been significantly reduced, but
Right.
obviously if they're unemployed, if they're laid off completely,
Right.
they can go the next day to apply for unemployment, or go online that same day to
Right.
apply for unemployment. If their hours have been significantly reduced, they can also apply for unemployment. Now, there also is a provision for unemployment and also what's known as paid family leave for workers who need to stay home to care. In the case of caring for relatives who are ill, paid
Right.
family leave is an option. And of course, in this state, we also have state disability insurance. So I would encourage people who may have these other requirements in terms of caring for people to look at paid family leave and state disability insurance.
Oh, awesome. Okay, before I go on, is there anybody else who has a question? Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share with our community members, especially members of underserved and underrepresented groups regarding unemployment, employment?
Well, I think there are a couple things. Yes, I would. First, now is not a bad time to look for a job, despite the fact that we're still very slow in terms of the recovery, especially here in the Bay Area, given that our lockdowns have been more intense. Employers are beginning to hire, and there are a lot of workers who still are not interested in coming back, either for health concerns, safety concerns, or frankly, if you're on unemployment and you were otherwise earning less than, say, $24,000 a year, you're probably better off economically not working, and in a narrow sense. But that means that for people who are willing to get out there and take some of these jobs, even the lower wage jobs, it's not a bad time. I would say if as people get vaccinated and feel more confident, obviously they do want to look and go through their local workforce boards. Continue to, if for people who are on unemployment insurance, they should be assured that, we have had this extension through September 6th, and EDD automatically transfers your claim with the additional PEUC benefits. On the other hand, as many people know, there's in many cases a requirement to recertify. So they're asking for additional documentation. There's this balance, Victoria, between
Okay,
payments, speed of payments,
right.
and anti-fraud. So people have been asked, EDD is now utilizing, among other vendors, a vendor called ID.me,
Oh, okay.
aimed
I've
at
heard
preventing fraud and verifying. And ID.me has a process that appears is cutting down significantly on fraudulent claims, but
Oh,
also
okay.
is requiring people to recertify, and that can delay and has delayed claims in some cases.
Right. Do you feel, this isn't on the list, but you make me think of this. So I agree with you. It's a good time to look for a job, right? Or maybe change careers or what have you. Now, with all of this, of 2 trillion, I think, dollars coming down for whatever, do you think, federal government and state government will have more jobs available for people because of this? I mean, will new type, like thinking of equity, right? And thinking of the racial equity and that big movement and more positions opening up in businesses and so forth in that area. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yes. I think, well, two things are at play. One, government is the one sector in our state that was largely immune from the cuts. It looked like there
Wow.
might be some cuts, but then the additional federal money came in, first through the American Recovery Act, the recent stimulus, and now it appears there'll be even more, and for transit. So yes, this enormous, unprecedented amount of federal spending, first with the CARES Act, then the stimulus back in December, then the additional stimulus in last month, and then of course the new stimulus proposed by Biden. It does seem like there is money going into state and local governments and into infrastructure,
Yeah.
and the hiring won't be immediate. Our experience with with ERA, the Recovery Act for the Great Recession, was that it took some time to
Right.
actually get this money out, even though they focused on so-called shovel-ready projects. It took time to get the money out, but it does seem like this will be a boost in terms of certainly preventing layoffs,
Right.
and perhaps even increasing hiring.
That's great. Now you made me think of taxes. What type of, are there any tax filing benefits as a result of COVID that we should look into when we file our 2020 taxes? That, do you know? You may or may not know, but you made me think of that.
Well, I mean, the big tax issue with unemployment assistance is that unemployment assistance is not taxed on the state level, but it is taxed on the federal level.
Okay.
So that's why people, EDD has always given people the choice whether to withhold money from their UI payments. Most
Right.
people, 90% plus, don't. But that is the law is still that not the state, but under federal tax, UI
Right.
taxed. Whether they change that or so forth, it's hard to say.
Right. Well, okay, at least, but usually you would pay taxes on the federal and state, but because of COVID, you only paid on federal.
Well, no, that actually it hasn't. We've never had a state
Oh,
payment.
okay.
That's not just
Oh,
COVID.
okay.
Those before COVID. We have had the federal, and that's still in place, and it's just a matter of what the federal government decides. But as of this time, you are required to pay
Okay.
taxes on the
Before
federal.
I go to my next question, does anybody in the audience, any FLCs or our guests have any questions that they'd like to ask? Okay. My next question is, let's see, where are we? Oh, okay. If a person quits their job because of stress. For example, maybe they think that people aren't, washing their hands, or they're afraid of COVID, or whatever that might be, right? Or not following the COVID rules, or because what's they right? Unethical practices. Are they eligible for unemployment?
They might be. Here's the standard, Victoria. It's
Okay.
you can collect unemployment if you have a reasonable belief that the workplace is not safe. So that even if the employer says it's safe, if a reasonable person, and obviously this is the sticking point, if a reasonable person could believe that the workplace wasn't safe, then you can collect UI. Traditionally, of course, you can't collect UI if you refuse a job offer. But what
Right.
EDD has started during COVID, beginning last May or June, is to set a new standard saying basically if people have a reasonable belief that the workplace isn't safe. And of course, that all comes down to really decision by EDD claims administrators, and perhaps at some point an administrative law judge, on whether a reasonable person would regard this workplace as unsafe.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. Okay, what if my company does not pay into unemployment insurance? Can I still file for unemployment? I thought all companies pay into unemployment.
Well, there are different. The question may be, there are different kinds of, some, like certain schools have their own UI self-coverage. Basically, right. For our people, Victoria, they don't need to worry. They can file for UI.
That's good.
They have to be workers. They have to be W-2 workers. Traditionally, they have to. Now they can also, if they're independent contractors, also file for UI.
Right. Okay, someone said, if my child's school is still closed due to COVID-19, am I eligible for unemployment if I have to reduce my work hours? And I think you may have touched on that.
Well, hopefully the school isn't closed, Victoria. We want these schools to be open.
Oh, I know where I live. They voted last Friday that they're not opening back up this school year at all.
Just terrible. But
yeah, so far Gilroy and Fremont, I don't know if any other school districts aren't opening that people know about, but I know Fremont for sure and Gilroy Unified aren't opening at all this school year or having summer school.
It's terrible. Well, as to the question of unemployment insurance, yes, if you need to take care of someone at home, depending on the particular situation, you may be able to file for UI, more likely for state disability insurance.
Yeah.
Or again, paid family leave. So there are benefit programs depending on, but from the start of COVID, there's been a recognition to have some benefit program to cover exactly this situation.
Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, let's see. Oh, and the last question was, when does unemployment extension end? But you said that was September.
Yeah, September of this year will be, unless it's extended again. It's been extended several times, so it could be.
Well, I know they extended payment on our student loans. Yay!
Well, there you have it.
I just found that out. Okay, so we're gonna go back into gallery view. So anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Mr. Bernick? Or any comments or thoughts regarding unemployment, EDD, COVID?
Well, your questions were a good one. I think we covered a lot.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
If anyone has any additional questions, Victoria, do have them, pass them on to you, and you pass them on to me.
Absolutely, I will. And then Mr. Bernick, before you leave us, can you share a little bit about your books, and then we'll make sure we post those links.
Well, I have several books already in your library. I first published Victoria in 1984, so I've been in this for some time. And I have a new book coming out. I'm very interested and very involved in autism employment.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I have a book that was published in 2015 that's in your library called The Autism Job Club. And I have a new book coming out in May called The Autism Full Employment Act.
Oh, wow.
Hopefully in your library.
That's awesome. We're definitely gonna have to have you come back as an author and
Okay.
speak on the book. Yeah, because so what was your passion behind writing a book on autism?
Well, I have a son who's now 31 with autism. I first got involved in the autism community back in 1991. That was a time if people knew about autism, they might have known about it through Rain Man.
Yeah.
Now, Victoria, I can't mention the subject without somebody telling me I have a niece, nephew, grandson.
Yeah.
There's so many more connections people have. So, but still a long way to go in terms of employment.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bernick. We thank you for your time. We know your time is very precious, and please don't be a stranger to the Community Connection Hour with the City of San Jose Library System, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for having me.